Okay. So what is your name?
My name is Vicki Filzer.
Okay, and your age is?
I'm 61 years old.
What is your relationship to the interview?
You're a student in one of my support classes, and I'm an instructional aide.
Okay, and are you or where were you married? Were you married and did you have family?
Yes, I met my husband while attending Cal Poly here in San Luis Obispo, and we got married in 1980. And then 5 years later, we started a family. I have 3 daughters, 2 son-in-laws, 5 grandchildren, and I own 2 dogs, and I have 3 grand-doggies.
Okay. How would you describe the family exactly? Like.
My family. That was my family.
Right.
So I think I answered that question.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
Where in? I think you already answered when and where you were born at, right?
I was born, actually, the hospital was in Santa Ana, but my family lived in Anaheim at the time. And then when I was 5 years old, we moved to Yorba Linda, California. And that's where I spent my childhood. I actually went to Richard Nixon Elementary School. It was called Mabel Payne. They had changed the name from Richard Nixon Elementary School to Mabel Payne. And so I had my siblings. I was the 4th out of 5 kids. And so my siblings, when they had went there, it was called Richard Nixon Elementary, and then they changed it to Mabel Payne, and that's where I went to elementary school. And that's the site of the Richard Nixon Presidential Library.
And now, were you the first generation to be born in the U.S.? If not, do you know who is?
No, yes. I was not the first generation. I am as far as I know, a 3rd generation Californian, but the very first that I have traced back was in John Gaston III, who was born in 1796 in West Virginia, was the earliest relative that I found to be in the U.S.
Okay. If capable, can you remember August 6th and 9th, 1945, when America dropped the 2 atomic bombs on Japan? How do you think the U.S. changed following this event?
Well, I was not born yet because I was born in 1958, but my parents were born then, and I spoke to my oldest sister about this because I really did not talk to my parents about it, but my father had been a Marine working on a U.S. naval ship as a machine mechanic and a cook. And one of his memories that he shared with my oldest sister was that one of the few times he went up above from the machine, shot on the bottom of the ship up to the top, there was a kamikaze pilot that actually dropped bombs trying to sink his ship. And the bombs landed about a mile away, and my dad quickly went back underground, up to the bottom, to the machine part of the ship, and he said he never came up again. So when the bomb was finally dropped to end the war, my father was greatly relieved for the end of the war, because he knew so many people that had died. So he felt great relief. And I think that the world had changed. I think U.S. was seen as a major force in the world political realm after that.
Do you remember November 22nd, 1963, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated? I think that's the word. Many people have said hope in America died a little that day. Do you agree, and how did America change?
Well, I was in kindergarten at the time, and I do recall, because I was just 5 years old, that a television was brought into the kindergarten, which never happened. And they did have the report on there that the president had died. And that made, I just remember the TV and the show, and that everyone was sad. My oldest sister had said that she remembered her teacher. She was 4 years older than me, and so she was 9 at the time. She remembers her teacher getting the phone call that he had died and had been killed, and she dropped the phone and sunk down and was sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. So a greater memory for me personally was the funeral. We gathered around our living room and our little black and white TV, and all 7 of us were intently watching that funeral, and it really made me sad, because here was a little boy who was just 2 or 3 at the time, and his dad had been killed, and he was so stoic in that moment, you know, following his father's coffin down the street and saluting it at the memorial service. And even at 5 years old, that made quite an impact on me.
So it's the time is at 6 right now. So how about the Vietnam War? Do you think America has lost trust in the federal government by the end of the war? And if so, has this trust ever been won back?
Well, I think the Vietnam War was a difficult situation, because we were trying to help not only the U.S. but the worldwide prevention of communism taking over. And so I know there was a lot of people against the war. My brother actually had a draft number, and he actually volunteered on the weekends, so he didn't have to go into the draft, and he went through training. I think that in the end, our involvement, we tried to do the right thing, and I think by pulling out and communism taking over at that point for many, many years, I think that there was a distrust in the U.S. for the government, but in the end I think it was a valiant effort to curtail communism.
How do you think the world preparation of the United States changed on July 2nd, 1969, when we first put the first man on the moon?
Well, it was a huge, because, you know, at that point, you know, I was a little bit older, so I was like 11 years old at the time, and it was this huge space race, trying to get the first satellite up there, and even though we weren't the first country to get a man in space, it sparked that interest in science for us and exploration. And so my maiden name was Armstrong, so I was definitely moved by Neil Armstrong stepping foot on the moon. And again, I remember my whole family, all 7 of us, gathering around the TV and watching those first steps, and it was quite an impact. And I think in the worldwide, I did prove that we are, when we have an idea to do something and we pull together our resources, that we can make it happen.
How do you think the world looked at the U.S. following Nixon's resignation on August 8, 1974, in response to the Watergate scandal?
You know, I think, you know, I grew up as a young Republican. I remember, you know, I went to Richard Nixon Elementary School, and that we were definitely in favor of what Nixon did internationally. He opened the doors and improved our relations with China and in the Middle East, and he did a lot of great things. I think politically throughout the world, there's a lot of bad things that happen, and so I don't think the other nations looked down on us. They just said, oh, he got caught. And when he resigned, I mean, he didn't have to resign. He did that for the good of the U.S. So I still think that Richard Nixon did a lot of great things for us.
In what way do you think our nation changed on November 9th, 1989, when the Berlin Wall came down, effectively ending the Cold War?
Well, I think that in my lifetime, the wall was put up during my lifetime, and I remember that being a really sad time because it separated families. My oldest sister had been an exchange student in Germany, and so her reaction to the wall coming down was, "Oh, good, now my friends on the west side don't have to petition for their family on the east to come over for a visit." It was quite a lot of red tape for them in order to see their relatives. So my reaction was, "Oh, good! I'm so glad that families can now reunite and that the country can become whole again." So I think that it was a good thing.
What do you remember about September 11th, 2001, when the country experienced the terrorist attacks on the Pentagon and World Trade Center? How was America changed by this?
Well, that was a devastating time. I was 32 at the time, and so more politically aware. And it was shocking. It was just shocking. When we first saw the images of it, it was non-belief that it could happen on U.S. soil. So we felt, my husband and I felt very vulnerable for the first time that bad terrorist things, attacks can happen in the U.S., and that was just shocking to us. We never thought it would happen.
Finally, it is said that every American citizen has a dream, be it wealthy, happiness, a better life for their children, etc. What was your dream, and what do you think you extended it?
Well, my dream was to, build a family that can create happiness and good memories, and I strive to make my children useful citizens, and I've succeeded in that. We've invested well, which has helped set my children up for success, and each one of my 3 girls are successful women in the world. 2 of them are married, and one of is forging her life on her own, and they are financially successful, each owning their own home, which is part of the American dream that I had. So I'm just thrilled for them that they're having successful lives.
Thank you so much for helping me with this assignment, and thank you for telling your story on what you experienced.
You're very welcome.